Ed Conway from the Telegraph. Chancellor, this stuff about bonuses is all fair and well, but if you ask most economists or analysts what was responsible for causing this crisis, they won't necessarily talk so much about bonuses. They'll talk about the imbalances that the world economy was facing. They'll talk about mismanagement and misregulation. I just wonder what has been done to tackle those deeper issues. We don't seem to have much on actually resolving imbalances. We don't seem to have any kind of conclusion on macroprudential regulation. And we're focusing on bonuses, which in comparison is quite piddling. I just wonder, is this not actually something of a failure so far?
No, I very much agree with you, and I have been saying over the last few days that if we simply concentrate on bonuses, which are as much a symptom of the problems that we have as a cause, although they have contributed to it, then we'll be making a big mistake. The big problem was that firms and regulators, and to some extent governments, did not see the risks that were being built up. Firms did not make provision to deal with those risks should they result. Firms, in many cases, and regulators allowed products to be developed and to be traded when they didn't fully understand the extent of their exposures. And all that points to a much tougher, more rigorous macroprudential supervision, and that is something that I have been calling for really since the start of this. It underpinned some of the reforms we had in our Banking Reform Act, which we introduced earlier this year. And it's one of the reasons why we think we will have to go further. In addition to that, it is necessary for, and this is something that we agreed today, to do what we've already committed to, and that is have a resolution procedure, a living will, if you like, for large and complex organisations, so that if they get into trouble, we can actually deal with them. And I think that will also discipline firms themselves when they start looking at how they're organised and how risks might transmit. And it's also necessary to ensure there's other reforms as well. Now, all of these are actually spelt out in the communiqué. They've probably had less attention than bonuses, which by their very nature, people are upset about them, people do focus on them, and that's not surprising. But it is absolutely right to say, and one of the reasons that we have dealt with remuneration in the wider context of financial stability is that there are many other things that you need to do to make sure that you try and avoid this problem in the future. A tougher regulatory regime, more capital, and also you then have to deal with some of the other things that can affect behaviour, which can lead on to risk. So all these things are important. Right.
Chancellor, I'm Nishtha from the World Service. You mentioned the swift implementation of $250 billion as trade finance initiative and to fight protectionism. I understand that only $19 billion have been set aside for the poorest countries. I would like to know why is the share so small, and if there is any revision likely in near future. Thanks.
What you'll see in the communiqué, there is concern about the impact of this downturn on the emerging economies, and especially on low-income countries. And in total, we have pledged, and we have just about met, a commitment to raise over $1 trillion, and much of that will be spent, you mentioned some directly, but other sums will be spent indirectly to help low-income countries. What we're very clear about, and especially at a time like this is precisely the time when low-income countries, if we don't do anything to help, we will see more people go back into poverty. And that's a price that we're not willing to pay. It would be morally reprehensible if we allowed that to happen, which is why, yes, this is an issue we will come back to it. Pittsburgh will come back to it thereafter. But we have now raised very substantial sums, and the IMF is in the process of dispersing them. Now, if I go to this block, and we start with the gentleman at the back and then come forward, if that's okay.
Marcus Falcon from Brazil. Chancellor, we have seen the past year that self-regulation did not work. The bankers are not willing to cut their own flesh. I would like to know your threshold. Till when you're going to wait to tackle this bonuses culture?
Well, we ended the system of financial self-regulation 12 years ago when we were elected to office, and the regulation here is on a statutory basis. Obviously, different countries have different regulatory models, but I think there's a fairly strong determination around the table today from Brazil and from other countries too, that we needed to make sure that the excesses of the past and the excessive risk-taking of the past are dealt with. Because it isn't just a price that is paid by an individual trader or an individual bank. It's a price that we can see all too well that has been paid by millions of people. So we need a far more robust regime, not just internationally, but each country to ask itself whether or not its regime at home is suitable and whether it's strong enough to deal with these problems. Yes, there's a chap with the blue shirt and then the man with the jacket in front. I think the fact that countries committed themselves not just to see through what they'd started, but importantly make sure that we've got a sustainable future is quite a considerable achievement. There's a lot more to do, of course, but the fact that countries are committing to work together to support their economies, to make sure we've got a stable background to go ahead on, that is very, very important.
Well, it has gone well. I think it's been an important step in what has proved a very successful process over the last 12 months, bringing together the biggest 20 economies in the world, leaders, finance ministers, central bank governors, to agree very far-reaching measures, which I think have succeeded in averting what would otherwise have been deeply damaging financial problems. Now, we're clearly not out of the woods yet. There is still a good deal of uncertainty about what will happen in the world economy over the next few months, but we have seen encouraging developments. The data is much more encouraging now than it was. I think what's been important about this meeting has been the extent of agreement about some quite contentious issues, like, for example, bankers' bonuses, which people thought there might be a great big row about. In fact, there's been a good agreement about that. There's been agreement about the need to keep the stimulus measures in place and to see through what was agreed in London in April and make sure those measures are fully implemented. There's been good agreement about the need to see through the process on financial services regulation more broadly, and on the need to introduce penalties on tax havens that don't meet the OECD standard from March of next year.
Do you think that this weekend has gone some way to help towards the right levels to restore lending, whether it's for people's mortgages or whether it's for even services that the taxpayer has to pay for?
I think the commitment to get credit going, to restore lending, is important. And one of the more technical things that were agreed at this weekend is that banks had to hold more capital, and actually that's what they need to help them lend more. That and other measures that governments right across the world are putting in place, as we are, to rebuild the banks and to get lending going. They're absolutely critical, particularly for small and medium-sized firms that they depend more than others on bank lending in order to go through difficult times like this. So it is absolutely critical to the future.
And do we think this is the beginning of the end for tax havens?
One of the good things that happened in the London meeting earlier this year was, for the first time, countries said, let's just stop talking about tax havens, let's do something about them. Now, in our case, we've served over 300 notices over 300 financial institutions affecting 100,000 people when we say we want to know what's going on here, we want the details. And if you take Liechtenstein alone, we reckon we'll get about £1 billion more back at a time when people are hard pressed. That and other contributions by cracking down on these tax havens, because it's not fair to the majority of people. That is a very significant step forward, and it shows what you can do if you get international agreements.
Chancellor, thank you very much.
Thank you.